So thank you very much indeed for joining us at the University of Essex, University Enterprise Zone. This is part of the Space to Grow series on investment readiness, and we thought we'd give the opportunity for people to actually ask questions live of our entrepreneurs in residence. I have with me today Josh Clarke, who is ably assisting the IT, and William Millar and Nitin Patel are our two entrepreneurs in residence who actually review the pitch decks and work with you on one-to-one mentoring for your good ideas. And it is a free service that we provide from the University of Essex. So University of Essex, what are we doing here? Well, a couple of years ago, we were granted University Enterprise Zone status, and with that came some funding to allow us to bridge a gap that we've identified in the marketplace for funding early and seed stage innovation. The key here is innovation. It's got to be innovative, it's got to be disruptive or new to the marketplace, and it's got to be something that people haven't seen before. This is the hardest area to actually fund because this is traditionally funded through Innovate UK grants and research grants and such forth. But when it gets to the point where it's beyond that and it needs equity investment to bring it up to venture capital stage, it's very difficult, and it's knowing where to go and who to ask. So this is why we set up this free service to speed up that process for businesses, but also to find those businesses that need that help and support. As I keep saying, it is a free service, but it is funded by the University of Essex, and we have a contribution from Essex County Council, and that's part of their Backing Essex Businesses programme. And so we like to encourage Essex businesses to come forward and step forward and put their hand up and be noticed, because we can give them some additional support using that additional funding that we receive. But this is open to all businesses across the whole of the UK, and we do get inquiries from abroad as well, and where it's appropriate, we will work with them. But the main emphasis here is to encourage the growth and the scale up of businesses in the UK that are going to create employment, that are going to bring new ideas to market, and will make a difference. In other words, they're going to start making profits, paying taxes, paying dividends to shareholders, and paying tax to the HMRC, who also fund universities, it so happens. So it all goes round in a circle. I'll just recap. This is the University of Essex, University Enterprise Zone, and part of the Space to Grow Investment Readiness Programme, which is the forerunner of businesses coming onto the Angels at Essex equity investment platform. A little bit of background on that. So we've been around for 18 months, so we are still the new kids on the block, as they say, and we have facilitated raising over £16 million for the businesses that have been successful and have come through our programs, either through the one-to-one mentoring or have actually made it to the platform and have been advertised to our 100+ registered investors. Our registered investors come from high net worth individuals right the way through to fund managers. We have VC funds on board who are interested in highly innovative businesses. And there is no amount too small. We will accept applications for people raising £50,000, and the largest one we've got at the moment is £3.5 million. So anywhere between there is where we actually operate. And as I say, this is seed, early stage. This is pre-Series A in 99% of the cases, and that's our area of expertise. If you want to go past Series A, we can still help you, but our focus is on the earlier seed stage. So I would like now to introduce Nitin Patel and William Millar, who are going to open up the forum. We have a chat box down at the bottom of your screen or at the side, depending on which device you're using, and you are free to ask any questions in that chat box. And if you wish to raise a question live on the thing, then by all means use the raised hand and we will monitor the screen to be able to pick you up and go forward. It's probably best to put it in the chat box first, and then we can pick you up and actually unmute you to be able to allow you to speak. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Nitin. Nitin, what's the actual process? What is it that you actually do with clients?
Okay, so just put it into context. I suppose most of the people we meet have had some sort of mentoring to get to the stage where they come and see us or feel that we can offer them something because it's attached to the Angels at Essex platform. So what we've sort of focused our services on, particularly, is towards the end of that process. And people who are on the call, and certainly myself and Bill, who will be talking in a few minutes, is the fact that we see this as the area where you need potentially investors to move to that next stage. So we get a mix of people. We get people who've already had some revenues, people who are a very early stage, but the ones we really can help and get the best benefit, not that we don't help anyone, is the fact that if you've got some revenue coming, you're looking to grow, then that's where the platform works best. And what we tend to do is then use our past experience. Myself and Bill have both been in big business. I used to run a company called Dimplex. As part of that, we acquired lots of businesses, but we actually fixed them by introducing new and innovative products rather than just cost saving. So it's a theme around trying to get people to understand that new products and new projects are like getting into, mainly in most cases, in an existing market that you're going to stretch and mold to what you are providing. So we have that sort of experience that we tend to use and provide. And hopefully that's been quite interesting for most people we've seen, because, as I said, we come from a fairly different background and a sort of more experienced outlook from our experiences of work we've done. So I'll pass over to Bill, who'll tell you a little bit more. And between the two of us, we tend to sort of give you feedback. So you'll see the styles in the two of us as well. Bill?
Okay, there's just a couple of points I'd like to pick up on. One that John mentioned earlier on, that the service is fully funded, which means it's free to the entrepreneurs who come towards us. And that means that we don't really have an agenda and behind anything that we do. What we're really wanting to do is make sure that whatever the business does is the right thing for the business. So if you come onto the platform, and we'd very much like you to come onto the platform, that's good. But if we can find you or suggest any other kind of support, we'll also do that as well. So, we do send people to Innovate UK Edge. We do send people to the growth hubs and to anybody else that might be able to support them. But our main role, as Nitin says, is to help people get their pitch deck ready and in a good place so that they can go on further and seek investment. My background is that I've got a degree in electronic engineering, so I like to know how things work. And so the questions that I kind of ask and think about is, well, how does this business actually work? Does its sales figures that it's projecting match up to the revenue that it's going to have? Does the solution that it's proposing match up to the problem that it's suggesting there is? And so I like to understand how the business itself is working as a business. And that's the kind of thought process that I go through whenever I see a pitch deck coming in the front of us. So that's the kind of a different approach that we take, and we to perhaps other investment groups who are charging for the service.
That's a very interesting point there, because others do charge for the service, and to be sustainable, they need to do that. We are very fortunate in being able to act as a free agent, free broker, call it what you will. And our platform is very much a shop window to allow investors to peruse and decide what actually appeals to them, which means that we can be totally agnostic when it comes to sectors. We're not tied down to any specific sector. Whilst we have an awful lot of artificial intelligence and creative ideas coming through our programs, it's not necessarily an absolute requirement that you have those. I mean, I'll throw open a few questions here. I mean, so you can do raised hands or use the chat, but how many in the audience here have had difficulty in the past raising equity finance for their venture?
We did struggle because I think we went down the bootstrap model, and I wouldn't do that again. I think that was a bad way to do it. I think it's quite hard because you have to learn multiple models. So again, you do the thing you do and you get good at it, and you've got to refine it, and then you've got this constant kind of messaging and all of these demands on it. But the financing model, so I now coach, so having gone through it and run a failed startup, which is totally a thing, I've now looped back round again to see how I can help. And I do find that the kind of structure around learning how to get funding is a specific thing in its own right. And I don't think enough credit is given to that. Like, you almost have to take some time out to go and learn how to do that, meet the right people, have the right conversations, to go back in and then do your work at the same time. And I think that's really hard when you're in a startup, because there's so much to do anyway, but being aware of its size, because there are so many ways to get money. You've got to be tenacious, you've got to hustle, and that's not natural to everybody. I think it's quite a big part of the subject, and it's a hard one to be presented with in a sort of palatable format. Does that make sense, John?
Yeah, very much so, very much so. I mean, so one of the comments I had from a successful business that we've helped raise funding was that they felt that they'd done 4 rounds with Mike Tyson when they've been working with Nitin and William. But that actually set them up. So they're now on the road to the future. And I think sometimes you need to go through that. You need to go through that learning curve, that learning process to go forward. Bob, you wanted to mention something.
Yeah, it was just, like Chris as well, we've just been through the Innovate Edge program. We've put our pitch decks together. So this is really for us, it's sort of, what are the next steps? How do you then take that forward? So yeah, that's why we're here, or I'm here for us. I'm
going to throw that open to William and Nitin. Would you like to pick up and know how it works?
Two things. I think from Sam's original discussion there, I mean, we tend to be realists. So, you're not going to get a nice arm around the shoulders to say, look, everything you're doing is great and it's going to work. And I think there's room for that, to be fair. I mean, I do some other work at an earlier stage where, we nurture very early stage people who may have an idea and help them. But I think what we do here, particularly with the restriction of generally 2 meetings, which is a good sort of structure for us to say, look, if you don't like what we're doing and we can't get what you're doing around, then there's no point keep on stretching this to an extent that we can both get bored with it. So it is a pretty much straight to the point sort of discussion where, as John said, I'm sort of Mike Tyson. Well, Bill is the other guy on our team who, between us, we give you a good feel. I'm hoping that when you left, it's not a case of saying, all they're doing is just beating us up. But that's really, for me, a real approach. Sam, maybe you might want to add, if you've just started sort of doing this as a coaching session, because obviously traditional coaching, in my opinion, is a bit softly, and there needs to be a point, not necessarily to get people to give up, but to get a bit real.
I've never done softly in my life, I'm afraid, but I think. Yeah, I mean, I do digital coaching, and my lots of things. I have a real issue with the fact that we force, in inverted commas, if you come out into this world with a digital education of any type, it's basically go and get a job, and there's a very good chance that won't be a UK-based job at the moment in development, or start a business. There's like nothing in between. So I think after all these years, one of my biggest takeaways is, I think we pivot too late. I think people get when you guys sit down with them, they sit and flesh out the concept, and then obviously it's iterative, obviously it's lean, obviously you're learning as you go. What I then see as somebody who now works your side of the table is there's pots of money out there. You have to be solving the right problem for the right people. It has to be a tangible solution. But if you come right out and then go back in again and almost actually park your needs and start thinking about how you best serve the market, so you're really strict on yourself nice and early. And I think that's the difference that I changed. I mean, I've known Bill, as you call him. I am now only calling you Bill from now on, but I've known him forever. And he was an absolute godsend to us back in the day, and really did help us a lot. But I bet you guys have tightened up your game, because I think people were nicer back in the day. There was, we were all learning collectively. And I think nowadays you guys are probably saying, nope, doesn't sound great. You're not going to get a yes, you're not going to get a no. So I think that early stage of being super tough is really good for you. You're building up resilience, getting on with it. But my biggest advice would be rethink it. How else could I get the money to solve this? Is there another model that I could be getting funding from to reintroduce that great idea? So I think there are other ways to fund it, and it's not just all about seed investment for me. I don't want to, if we're all on commission for getting seed investment, obviously that's the best idea, but I think there's other ways to look at it.
Yeah, there's a couple of comments I'd make, Sam, really, that in the stuff that we do, we tend to persuade and convince people to look at it from the investor's perspective as well, because the entrepreneurs, when they're setting up a business, they're so deeply involved with that business, with that idea, with getting it out and commercializing it, that's really what consumes them. But then they've got to realize that when they come to look for equity investment, and we're not on commission to get equity investment, you know, as we've said, we're a completely free service. But when they come to look for investment, they're selling part of that business, selling part of that baby that they're generating and living and breathing. So you've got them to look at it as a sales activity, and it's the investor that's going to buy from you. So you need to understand how to speak in the language that the investor will understand. And very often that's a very simple language, and it's a story that you want to get across. There is a problem, there's a solution, there's a market for it. I know what the solution is. I can build it. I've got the team around me to do it. We know that we can get some traction. We've made some sales, and this is our revenue projection. And the story is no more complicated than that. But you've got to be able to put it across, justify it in facts and figures, and then convince the investor that that is a good story and that they want to invest in you. The other thing that you said, Sam, was that you have to be tenacious. And that's certainly very true. You know, you've got to, it's not just a case of if you build it, they will come. You know, you've got to go out and kiss a lot of frogs before you find that prince that's going to invest in you and take you through. And we're one of those channels. We get you to a different set of investors, but we're not, you know, don't regard as being exclusive. You know, please keep promoting your business and your business investment opportunity to other people. We can help you. The platform will help you manage those investors, but we're not exclusive, and we don't expect you to be exclusive to us. So it's a couple of comments just based on what has already been said.
Okay, thank you. I mean, Sankami, you've got a couple of questions that you wanted to put forward.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice being around here. So my name is Sukomi. I'm a master's student with the University of Essex. So I put a couple of questions there. I mean, the angel investors, are they like the dragon den we watch on TV where they scrutinize and punch holes in your business idea before they eventually get to the point of what you want to do? That's number one. And then if the business model is good, what's the max the angel investors can put into the business? Let me start with those two questions first.
Can I take the first one, John? Because I have a specific view on this. I think we're better than those guys on television because we're down to earth and we're not actually looking for an easy, cheap investment. So we'll tell you what we know. So we might reach a point where we don't have enough experience to maybe talk about the subject you might have picked. But I would say at the moment, you'd find it very difficult for me and Bill not to have some sort of understanding. I mean, we've got about 120 years worth of living life in us, and I've been working for 30 years and Bill's done. And between the two guys, most of the subjects that come to us at the moment, we can reasonably give you some positive, negative feedback. But the answer is that we are not gaining or losing anything by talking to you in a professional, straightforward manner. Whereas those guys on the television are looking for a cheap investment. So that's why we're not Dragon's Den. But on the same basis, as I said earlier, we're not going to be at the stage where if we think it's not right and you're not going to get there with us in a reasonable time, then we'll tell you. So I hope that answers a sort of balanced view of what we try and do.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's brilliant.
You asked about money. I said at the beginning, you know, we don't actually have a fund of our own. We're using other people's money, and it's up to the investors how much they wish to invest. At the moment, we're taking applications anything from 50,000, and the biggest one on our platform at the moment is 3.5 million. So somewhere in between. But as I say, we focus on seed, okay? So, you know, if it's an established business and it's already got million revenues and it's looking to raise 5 million and that sort of thing, it's probably not the best platform to come on. But we can still talk to you about your pitch deck and the way you're presenting. And I think Nitin summed it up, and both Williams summed it up when they said that, you know, we give constructive advice. Constructive criticism is always welcome. We're not yes men and we're not yes people. And I think that's something that you have to accept, that we are going to tell you the truth about your project. And the truth sometimes hurts, but you're better off hearing it from us than having the embarrassment of standing in front of total strangers and being dressed down for the whole public to see. We do run pitch decks. Pitch decks, what am I talking about? We do run pitch events. We've successfully run a number of pitch events, which have actually generated quite a bit of money for some of our businesses. And we do propose to launch a whole new range of pitch events in the new year, starting probably late January. We're just looking at our portfolio of the businesses that we've currently got and in the pipeline to assess which ones we ought to be putting forward for an open pitch event. But we also encourage and prepare our clients to pitch in other pitch events. We had 2 pitching at the Mayor of London's creative pitch event last week. And there'll be more pitching to other platforms and other agencies around the country that we've helped prepare. And they tend to do quite well. As an aside, the 100th investment made by Minerva in the East Midlands was in fact to an Essex-based business. And we're talking a couple of million there. So you know, we can spread the net quite widely and actually attract investors from all over. We've had about 500,000 invested from India so far. So there's lots to choose from.
Question on there, how much max can a good business model get? I think the answer to that is, you know, how long is a piece of string? But you really need to think about it in terms of, you know, what am I doing as a business? And therefore, how much do I need to get me to the next stage of my business? So rather than thinking about how much can I get, it's how much do I need? And does that make sense in terms of my revenue forecasts and the return on investment that an investor would get? So it's kind of spin it round and think of it the other way. And then you can sort of build up a picture of perhaps phasing the investment such that, you know, I'm starting up, then I'll get some and I'll get some investment to get me going. Then I'll get some revenue through the door. I've now got more opportunity to see how my revenue projections are working out. I can get more investment based on that. And gradually, as I'm scaling up, I can get more investment as I go along. Now, of course, there are disadvantages of trying to get lots of phases of investment in, because then you're spending your time finding that investment, but it may be a way that you have to plan things out so that the business can grow and scale to what you want it to be.
I think being clear to investors from the onset of the kind of sums of money you are going to need and the milestones that you're going to have to go through to achieve that is quite important. We came across a case recently where investor relationships weren't too good because the company had raised its round and then immediately opened another round without actually letting the first round of investors know that that's what they were going to do, which left the first round of investors sort of thinking, well, hang on, this wasn't entirely clear to us. Perhaps, and it all comes down to questions and answers and that sort of thing. But it being open and honest is by far the best. Sam, you've got your hand raised.
I do think that is where I would say there needs to be some work done around repositioning what funding is, because that is naive behavior, but it also assumes that investment as it is almost like a bank. You know, you're just drawing down money and it's a pot of money that I can draw down on, and doesn't allow for the fact that investors are looking for a return. Like, you're there for a reason. You're not there just to make up one of a portfolio of other businesses. If you're there running a business and presumably technical and scalable, that's the focus. And I think that gets lost a little bit sometimes. People just get very caught up in the funding model, so they, and get taken off path. Where the other side of this for me is watching the same bits of software get funded repeatedly. So virtual high streets is in a big one. This last 12 months, we've seen virtual high streets. Who is not building a virtual high street is the bigger question. But they're all getting investment. Well, they're not all going to be first past the post. They're not all going to be the best one in class. So to my mind, that then suddenly becomes about you. What makes you that much more special? What makes your construct technically sound? What makes your integration opportunities? And just to give you a bit of an insight, I'm a digital strategist, and I'm an old lady. I've been doing this for a long time. I'm now working with mature digital businesses whose product is the service, the software that they sell. That's literally the whole business model is based on that. And I would say I'm watching two types of businesses, and the outcomes have been based on happenstance. They've got a technical team, great documentation, revision history, full understanding of integration, security, etc. Really good growth model within the dev team. Or there's a geek. We don't really understand him. We sort of talk to him. He speaks in a language we don't understand. He's been building something based on a relationship with 2 or 3 other bits of software, potentially completely proprietary, and potentially something that can't be easily pivoted because it's been built on the use case of existing customers. That's companies that are 10, 15 years in and are now looking to pivot. And it's not easy because essentially you can't go back. It's a bit like pickup sticks building development over time. If you pick this bit, another bit's going to fall over if it's not been built and documented well enough. So that's the kind of things today that you could be considering that's going to change your outcome in the future. And much more of that kind of, like, I always describe building code as building buildings, and we're an unregulated industry. So if you build buildings that are solid and tangible, and you can explain that and document it and understand it, that's going to be the difference between the virtual high streets that make it and the ones that don't. And I think there's just an element of kind of like shining a light on that is going to give you that uniqueness. But that's just from somebody who's watching a bit further along, digital maturity and that sort of element.
Okay. Well, I was at a webinar this morning with the Bank of England, the British Business Bank, and what have you, and they were saying that there was a falling demand for capital by businesses. We don't see that. We see a rising demand. Now, whether that's because of the marketplace that we're in, and we're in that early stage, whereas the Bank of England and British Business Bank tend to fund later stage, they tend to fund Series A and onwards with their current programs. It'll be interesting to find out from the audience if they've got any views on that. And also their comment was that the capital spending in research and development is actually falling, not rising, and it's way below 2015 standards. And yet we're seeing all of this new technology coming through, a new wave of technology.
So basically, I'm just looking to confirm if any of your services is available to a startup in the aviation sector, looking to raise about $6 million to start a service.
Okay, our services are open to any subject. And one of the strengths I'd like to think myself and Bill give you at least a view on a lot of subjects early stage. So I would suggest that if you chose to talk to us at this stage, it wouldn't be negative on either side, because it's a subject that we would have some view on as we've worked on similar things in other areas. The size you're looking for may be a bit too big, and John will tell you a little bit more about that, but potentially, if things sort of look in the direction with the deck, when myself and Bill have talked about it, then John can take that on and see, because one of the things we've benefited from being quite a general sort of investor fund opportunity, that we get other guys who are not necessarily looking for something direct on the platform, but say, if you got something interesting, specifically specialized, something like you talking about there, then we could actually want to talk to them. So that they're the sort of opportunities that we think we can create, partly because we're pretty flexible and really not sort of saying no to the first stage to anything. So hope that helps. John, you might just want to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, aviation is not a problem. We've got other aviation products and services in our pipeline. And it all comes down to the conversation we were having earlier of actually asking for how much you need, not what you want. You might be looking for $6 million in the future, but what do you actually need now? And if you're not revenue generating now, then getting $6 million is like pie in the sky. But that doesn't mean to say it's not possible. Every single case is judged on its own merits. There isn't a benchmarking system for this. People might tell you there's a benchmarking system, but there isn't one, because the right place, the right time, the right project, that tends to work better. And sometimes the timing's not quite right. Sometimes it's perfect. With the aviation industry in crumbling at the moment, with world travel dying on its feet, begs the question, what is it that you can do for the aviation industry that would be totally radical, revolutionary, and will put it back on its feet again tomorrow? So, is it in the electric aeroplane, I ask you? But we need, everything needs to have its place, and its place in time.
Thanks, John, and thanks, Nitin. I take on board everything you've said, and all the answers to your questions, I do have them. And I'll send an email to Josh, who's advised of an email address, and then we can take it on from there. So I don't
your email address and your telephone, so we can have a chat, and then we'll get you up on our process.
That would be great. Thanks a lot.
That is very interesting, actually, because we haven't mentioned that. The process that we take people through is very much a simple staged process. And it actually starts off with a good old-fashioned telephone call. It's great doing email and Zoom calls and everything else, but sometimes a straightforward telephone call is the very first starting point. And it is amazing how many people forget to send us their telephone number. It's almost as if they've forgotten that telephones actually exist. Unfortunately, you're talking to a grey-haired generation here that actually still uses telephones. And that's the starting point. From then on, it could be by Zoom, it could be your email, documents passing backwards and forwards and so forth. But it's that initial phone call that makes the difference. A lot can be said over the phone.
John, just remind me of, so the last question from Oti reminded me of a case we had a few weeks ago when we were speaking to a business who, again, was looking to raise quite a large sum from a pre-seed position, from not currently revenue generating. I think it's something that's worth noting in the sense of actually following on really from the point of raise what you need in that moment. And I think it's probably worth having a kind of looking deeper into that point in the sense of raising what you need to then get you to a point where you can raise further funding. I think is an important strategy to implement at an earlier stage, particularly when you're working on something that needs a lot of capital to really get going.
Yeah, you're perfectly correct. William talks about the story that needs to be told, where you've come from, what you're actually doing, where you're going. People need to know that story. They need to be there for the journey. Investors may come on board for just part of the journey, or they may be there until the very end. There are different investors for different stages of your business. We work with other organizations that can actually trade off-market shares. In other words, a shareholder or an investor can actually sell their shares on to another party and so forth, so that they can step out of that project at that stage, especially if they don't wish to invest any more in further stages. So there's lots and lots of things that could be done to help a business through there. But when it comes to a pre-seed business, in other words, an early stage, and it's not generating revenue, which is the hardest to value, because you have to prove the market size that you're going to be going into. So you need proof of concept. Does it work? You need proof of market. Is someone going to buy it? And if so, how many and how much? And those kind of things tend to get neglected by some inventors because that's alien territory to them. I always remember the anecdote that I use. I'm sorry, guys, you've heard it so many times before, about the guy who had a little gadget for his boat, which helps ropes actually to put the sails up and down. And he'd spent over 350,000 of his own money designing and developing this. When asked, where does this fit? he said, my boat. It didn't fit any other boat. So what was the purpose of him getting equity funding to develop this further when actually it wasn't proven? It proved it worked, but it didn't prove that there was going to be a market for it going forward. So there are certain things that you have to do, and you have to step out of your comfort zone. And that's where we bring external expertise in. We bring in experts from all over the place to help you develop your product or your service in that way. But that's enough about talking about widgets. What about SaaS services, where it's very, very popular, cloud-based? It's an intangible sale and that sort of thing. Right, okay, so it's digital, it's SaaS. We have actually got investors who like SaaS because they've made their millions in SaaS.
Yeah. Have you done HaaS?
That we termed that, myself and Bill, it's heating as a service. So we're going to go for that. So hope you've not trademarked it already, Bob.
Hardware as a service.
There you go. Right, go on then.
Yeah, so we're looking, part of our change in strategy, we've very much been a project by project organization. So we're looking now to move what we've done to a HaaS model, a combination of HaaS and SaaS. So that one of the big things I've always been concerned about is a lot of our technology goes out, sits in a location at the end of the contract, it doesn't come back. And its life hasn't completed, as it were, could last a lot longer. So we're looking at a HaaS model to increase the revenue in a certain way, but also to get that piece of kit back after 2 years, 3 years, whatever the contract length is. And then it can actually earn higher revenue once we've carried out a few tests and checks with it. So it's a new model for us, and it's something that it's sort of similar to leasing, leasing everything to the business to provide the service.
So, Rob, we're joking a little bit, but myself and Bill, when we were talking about heating as a service, we termed Rumblos. You were at that age when Rumblos used to exist. So I think that model is coming back. It's just a sexier way of saying what people used to do. You know, they couldn't afford something, they borrowed it, paid for it.
Yeah.
And, you know, so I firmly believe that everything comes in a circle. And I think that's where we are with this borrowing money and paying up front sort of thing. So I you know, we'll have a chat. I mean, you're on my list to give you a ring at some point soon. So
excellent.
But we will have a chat, because as I said, myself and Bill have been talking about that on a slightly different subject.
Yeah, I think for the world we're in, any sort of product that can do that, I think, is in a better place. So that's why we're looking at that. Good.
So at least, as I said, we are quite general in our approach, so we can pick a lot of subjects, and that's quite interesting, as you suggested. Cool. Because, you know, today's subject of SaaS is what used to be people buying on a HP.
Let's face it, Microsoft are very good at it because all their products are dated. Even Apple, you know, how many Apple devices where the batteries run out or you can't upgrade the software anymore? So, you know, everybody's doing it in some form or other. Yeah. And yes, we do owe it to the planet to be able to recycle hardware rather than putting it into tips or other things.
I think you know, the right to repair legislation that's coming on board, you know, as a you know, an influencer into this marketplace as well. That while it may be limited in its scope at the moment, it will change. And over time, and you've seen the way that Apple are beginning to change as well, so that people can repair their devices. So there's, you know, as John says, for the benefit of the planet, then we ought to stop chucking stuff into the landfill and actually do something about it or reuse it. So that's another, you know, comment about the time can be right for an entrepreneurial activity, and sometimes people can get into the marketplace too early or they get there too late. But timing can also have a big influence on whether a business is going to succeed or not.
And we talk about things like the low carbon investment fund available in some of the areas in the east of England. I mean, that would be of interest to something that could be recycled on a regular basis because of the fact that it does actually cry out low carbon, especially if it's manufactured in another way. And that's something else I wanted to touch base on, that, you know, when it comes to the making of products as opposed to services, everybody now needs to really consider, is it a low carbon manufacture? Is it environmentally friendly? Is it going to be recyclable? These things tend to get forgotten by the innovators.
I wanted to say what you just said, which is, again, that's what I'm talking about, doing a 360 and coming at it from another angle. If you had a HAS as a model, but you can then loop in a sustainability, carbon neutral, net zero agenda, there's different pots of funding attached to that motivation. So I think that's, you know, when you helicopter out of it, that's what it's not just about what you do for the client directly, it's like, what do you offer for the world? My other question, so I do a specific thing and spend my time, I'm looking for regulation, more regulation in the industry of code sales. And my skill set ultimately sits in sort of technical SEO. How do you guys advise around market research, but specifically in as far as it's one of the reasons I'm not a massive fan of renaming things, because everything's got a name in the internet and Google understands things. So if you're going to rename something, you've kind of got to teach Google what you sell. If you do that well, that's an absolute sweet spot. But if you don't do it well, it's a waste of time, essentially. How do you deal with that? Like, there are existing markets. Do you use analytics search console? Do you look at competitor analysis? Do you use SEO tools? That would be my other point, is that sometimes some of this data seems as if doesn't exist, but it actually does exist. There are literally...
Sam, as I said, we're at a stage, if those guys aren't doing that, then they won't pass us. We don't do that for them.
So if they came and they didn't have that information,
we would tell them they need to go back and start looking at it, so we can address saying, you know, have you done the market research to a level that and that's what myself and Bill are. I mean, I've invested millions, not mine, but someone else's, on the basis of that knowledge. So this is the difference this actual environment gives, and no disservice to you, but that's the difference in mine and Bill's ability in that hour to actually understand whether we've got that. Now, that's why we're saying we're not for the faint-hearted at this stage, because we'll say no. If we can't get an answer that's satisfactory in some of the areas that we feel, and my first line is, am I going to invest in you or BT shares? And I need you to be that ready at the time you're talking to us. And that's why we've got the traction we did in the short term, with the number of people that John's been able to get through the platform. And the platform a year ago was a platform. So, you know, we sort of have that inbuilt. Now, whether we can keep that going because we're not doing our day jobs as we did years ago is something we need to keep on maintaining. And we do strive to sort of keep on top of it. But there's an element of people in here, and that's where we do make sure they have the mechanics. And there's a 16-page document that Bill explains and I explain. And those 16 pages, in our opinion, has served us well in terms of what it covers, and market data, competitiveness against what you're providing against other people. And so those are some of the things that, by the way, I missed. So, you know, as an earlier stage, and I do some of that at Judge Business School, we have to explain that you might think you've got the best and the latest in the world, but if you search the market, you'll find someone's doing it, and your job then is to explain why you're doing it different and why I'll pay you for it. But if they've not done that for themselves, then, you know, come to us, we'll tell you nicely first time, but that's what we do. So, you know, I would say we don't explain those things, but we expect them to be there when they come to us.
Yeah, I mean, we get, you know, you quite often you'll get people who are going for 10% of a UK market that's worth 200 million, that's, you know, a percentage of a global market that's worth $1 billion or something like that there. But that that tells you at a top level that there's a market there, but it doesn't actually tell you how you, the entrepreneur, how you, the business, is going to get into that market and generate some revenue. So from an engineering background, that's why I like to see how is it going to work? How is it going to be built up? Who are the people that you're going to sell this to? How long is it going to take you to sell it to them? And if you work out those numbers, do the numbers make sense? You know, can you sell, you know, 10 items a day for 2 years in order to make the revenue projections that you're going to make? Is that you know, a sensible number? And that all takes you back to, you know, the market. Is the market there? Who are the ideal customers that you're going to sell to? What are you going to charge for the thing that you're selling, what your business model is, and that in turn allows you to make the revenue projections. But if those numbers don't add up or you can't sort of justify them, those are the kinds of things that the investor is going to ask you right away. So we try to make sure that people, before they go in front of the investors, can justify those figures in their own mind, and that they have a reason for saying what they're saying.
We're not experts at everything. And I don't believe anybody can actually say they are experts in everything. But we're good at what we've been doing. About 70% of those businesses that have made it to the platform have actually generated equity investment of some form or other. And when I say some form or other, you know, we've got future funds, convertible loan notes, straightforward equity, VC funds, and high net worth. But something that some investors like to do, they like to actually get hands-on in the business and do something to help the business. Now, obviously, there are restrictions with EIS, SEIS, and other things, but sometimes just mentoring, they quite like to do that. So bear that in mind, that, you know, sometimes if you're not very good at marketing, perhaps you need a marketing specialist to help you develop that business further. And who better than an investor who's actually going to earn from it as they're going forward.
Please, you know, come back to our other sessions on different topics. You know, we cover all the way from legal, tax, looking through the pitch deck. William and Nitin run a really good session on that. And so the bulk of our sessions now coming up will be back in January. We do have one in December on the 10th. And that's all about R&D tax credits. So it's a really good one to kind of get an insight into that. And we're doing that in collaboration with EY as well, who'll be taking that session. But January onwards, we're running weekly sessions. So please do keep an eye out for that. And if you're not on our mailing list and you want to be, please do email the contact email that John's just put in the chat. And also, if you're interested in being on the Angels of Essex platform and you haven't had any contacts with us previously, please do again contact that email uez@essex.ac.uk and we can take it from there.
Thank you everybody for participating, being patient with us today. Yeah, I hope you liked the open forum, the open questions, being able to ask virtually anything. And I'm very pleased I didn't have to mute anybody or bleep anybody. So thank you very much indeed. Needless to say, you know, it is a free service and we are here. Well, look, thank you once again, everybody, for attending. My name's John Stenhouse, Josh Clarke, William Millar, Nitin Patel. As you can see, we are human, we are real people, and we are here and available to talk to you. And we do like to talk, you may have noticed.